Okay, good evening, everyone, and welcome to Torah Studies, Parshas Yisro. This week, Parshas Yisro, of course, we are going to read the Ten Commandments, talking about after the Jewish people coming out of Egypt, getting ready to receive the Torah. And the topic of discussion today is the theory of everything. I'm sure you heard of this before. What people are trying to figure out, theoretical physicists trying to figure out the theory of everything. And the discussion is about, when it comes to the Jewish people, we find something unique about the fact of the survival of the Jewish people, the fact of the unity, how united we are, how connected we are. And as the Rebbe brings out in this sikha that we're going to learn tonight, is that there is something unique that unites us all together as one. It's a story of in Yerushalayim. There was once a woman that gave birth to her 10th child, and it was a boy, and the bris was going to be on Shabbos. And friends in the neighborhood, they came to help out on Thursday, and the daughter of one of her friends, the mother of the baby, asked the daughter of one of her friends to go out to a neighbor next in a couple of blocks away. And this was a relative of hers, and they asked her to go get the food for the bris. And this little girl, she goes, and a few blocks, she knocks on the door, and she says, "I'm here to pick up the food for the bris for Shabbos." And the woman tells her, smiles and tells her to come in, to sit down, gives her something to drink. And she goes and prepares food, puts in the pans, and she gives her a whole bunch of food. And as she's about to leave, she goes and says, "Okay, we'll see you at the bris." And she says, "Okay, I'll be happy to come. Where's the bris? Whose bris is this?" And she's like, "What do you mean? Didn't you just give me all the food for the bris?" He says, "Yes, you asked someone needed food for the bris, so I gave you food for the bris." And she apologizes and says, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I must have knocked on the wrong door." And she says, "Why are you sorry? We are all here. We're all here for each other. I'm happy to give it to you." The unity of the Jewish people, strangers. You don't know them. But as soon as you see a fellow Jew, I was flying this week from Australia to New York to London. Everywhere that you see, another Jewish face, to come over, where's the mikveh? Where can I go? And you see that the unity, something unites us, something very, very special. The unity of the Jewish people. And the Rebbe will explain us, give us something, an explanation of something deeper, what's behind it. So let's see inside. We read in this week's Torah portion. It says, "Vayisum Efirim," when the Jewish people traveled from Egypt, coming to the Mount Sinai to receive the Torah. The Torah says they journeyed from Rephidim and they arrived at the desert of Sinai, and they encamped in the desert, and Israel encamped there opposite a mountain. So when you read the English, you don't see much of something special, but if you read Hebrew, you can see that the words that is written that they encamped, and Israel encamped. In Hebrew, there's a difference between the singular form and the plural. Vayachanu means they encamped in plural. Vayichan is singular. Vayichan Sham Israel. And as if one person encamped there. And Rashi picks it up and he explains. He says, Vayichan Sham Israel, and Israel encamped there. The verse uses the singular form, denoting that they encamped there as one man with one heart. By contrast, all the other encampments were divided with complaints and strife. So there is something unique, something special about this encampment when they came to the Mount Sinai to receive the Torah, that at that moment, they were all united as one, like one heart. And the question is, forget about for a moment how it's happening. How is it that we are that all the Jewish people were like at one? We know, they say the 2 Jews, 3 opinions. How does it happen? Well, the question is, number one, what is the benefit of this? What is the benefit? After all, you are about to receive the Torah. When we're saying to receive the Torah, it's not like receiving a free lunch. We're saying, the whole group will receive a free lunch. They all receive the same box of lunch. You're talking about receiving a Torah. The Torah is such a complex teachings and such a deep thing, the Torah, that is, in order to receive it, obviously, 2 people don't receive it in the same way. I would think that in order to receive the Torah, it would be the best way that each one receives the Torah in their own unique way. We see things, we may see the same thing, but we perceive things differently. We understand things differently. And this is as the Talmud teaches us. The Talmud says how vast the differences that God created us in that way, that we are not necessarily like one another. On the contrary, it is a good thing that God created us just like we don't look like each other. The same way is the way we think. We don't think like one another. Each one has their own unique way of thinking. As the Talmud says, Tanu Rabbanan, the sages thought, one who sees multitudes of Israel recites, there's a special blessing to recite. We say, Baruch Atah Hashem Chacham HaRazim, blessed are you, God, who knows all secrets. Why do we say a blessing that Hashem knows all secrets? Because there are secrets. We may look similar, but we saw a difference, just like the faces are different. She'ein daitam daimel zelazeh. Why is this? It says God sees a whole nation whose minds are unlike each other and whose faces are unlike each other. And we see another passage in the Talmud that says something similar. The sages taught the fact that Adam, the first man, was created alone, serves to declare the greatness of the Supreme King of Kings, the Holy One, blessed be He. For a person stamps several coins with one seal, and they're all similar to each other. But the Holy One, blessed be He, stamps all people with the seal of Adam, the first man, and not one of them is similar to another. As it is stated, it is changed like clay under the seal, and they stand as a garment. They stand as a garment, meaning just like garments, you make clothing, the clothing don't look like one another. The same thing, the people, they don't look like each other. So God created us in such a way that we are so different. So that's the question. So if people are so different, then why were the Jewish people expected to be as one? Keish echad belev echad. Before receiving the Torah, and really come to think of it, how was it even possible? How is it even possible? This is a question the Rebbe is asking. As the Rebbe asking, the question is, every Jew underwent an internal process to prepare themselves to receive the Torah. Naturally, each person underwent this process according to their individual nature, unique from anyone else. So accordingly, shouldn't the verse have stated, and they encamped at the foot of the mountain in the plural form? So this is question number one. How is it possible that we should be one? And why was it necessary we should be like one? What is interesting, there's another question that we can ask on this Rashi. This is not the first time that we find such an expression about unity, that they were as one heart. Previously, when Paroi and the Egyptian chased the Jews, the Torah states that we find also a unity like one heart by the Egyptians as well. And this we see in the next text. It says, Ufaroi ikriv. Paroi drew near, and the children of Israel, they lifted up their eyes, and behold, the Egyptians were advancing after them. They were very frightened. And the children of Israel cried out. They cried out to God. So in that verse, we see also, V'nei Mitzrayim noseya acharayim. The Egyptians, they were advancing after them. The word noseya means traveling, advancing. Now, the word noseya is in singular. In Hebrew, if you want to say in plural, you say Mitzrayim nos'im. But here, again, it's in singular. So Rashi also, there too, Rashi points out a similar thing. Noseya acharayim. He's advancing after them. Says Rashi, belev echad keish echad. The Egyptians were advancing after them. The Hebrew word noseya, traveling, is written in the singular to teach us that the Egyptians chased the Jews with one heart, like one person. So we find a very similar thing. We say keish echad belev echad by the Jewish people, and here by the Egyptians we say belev echad keish echad. But if you noticed, there is a difference. By the Jews we say keish echad belev echad, like one man with one heart, like one person with one heart, person before heart. By the Egyptians, Rashi says that they were belev echad keish echad, with one heart, like one man. What's the difference? Oh, here's a big difference. When you're talking about Egyptians, it's not like when you're talking about the Jew. The Jewish people, what united them is the fact the person came first. The fact that they were Jewish, the fact that they were united as one, that led to become like one heart. But the Egyptians, it was something else, totally opposite. The Egyptians by nature, they were not united at all. They were fragmented. They were separated. What united them? The one heart, meaning they had one common goal. What was the common goal? The hatred to the Jews. We actually see it a lot. Unfortunately, you can have different nations. Look at the Arab countries that fought the state of Israel. If you talk to any serious scholar of Arab culture, will tell you how much they are fragmented. And yet, when it comes to the hatred of the Jews, all of a sudden, they're all united. This is the belev echad k'ish echad. What united them was the common goal. For any typical person, including Egyptians, the heart, the cause comes first. And the one person, the unity comes afterwards. The Jewish people are unique in that what comes first is the one person. The one person reality. And only after that comes a shared heart. And this is the way the Rebbe explains it. The Rebbe explains it in the Sikha of this year. The Rebbe says, this is the difference between the one heart as one people of the Egyptians and the as one people with one heart of the Jews. For the Egyptians, the fact that they came together as one person was a symptom of their shared heart in the cause of chasing after the Jews. But as an Egyptian people, they were not as one at all. By contrast, in our Parsha, when speaking about the Jewish people, the unity of like one person is a result of the very fact that we are Jews, one person, not the common goal. It is the fact that we are Jews. But really the question is, why? Why do Egyptians naturally exist apart from each other as opposed to the Jews? What is it about the Jews that we are all as one? And here's a teaching from the Sachchev Rebbe, Avnei Nezer, Avram Bernstein, and says as follows, which is similar to what we just said. With regard to the Egyptians, Rashi writes with one heart as one person, whereas with regards to the Jewish people, Rashi phrases it in the opposite way, as one person with one heart. Why? Because the Jewish people are inherently one people at their source. The only thing missing is for them to actualize that in their hearts and desires. When it comes to the core, we are one. Yes, it does not always express itself when we express ourselves on the outside, but in core, we are one. By contrast, the nations of the world are inherently fragmented, and it is only a mutual goal or desire to achieve something that can bring them together as one. So to understand the fact that the world is a fragmented world. This is really the reality. The reality of the world is like that. We have, we're not big scientists here. Maybe some of you are, not me. But we know there is the concept of the theoretical physicists. What they try to figure out is not what is happening, but why things are happening. If you look about the theories of Newton's laws of gravity, that was a major breakthrough, that you could predict why things were happening. And in general, this is what the great scientists were looking for. They were looking for the theory of everything, of trying to figure out what is it that can explain everything else. There's an interesting text that was a quote from Albert Einstein. And he said as follows, he said, I want to know how God created this world. I'm not interested in this or that phenomenon, in the spectrum of this or that element. I want to know his thoughts. The rest are just details. So what does it mean he wants to know his thoughts? Obviously, he didn't pretend to be God or anything like it. But when we're talking about God's thoughts, it is basically a metaphor for the ultimate goal of modern physicists. They're trying to understand the theory of everything, to understand the purpose of everything. And do they succeed so far? Not much. There is no explanation to everything. There's another quote from Corey Powell. It is the biggest of problems. It is the smallest of problems. At present, physicists have two separate rule books explaining how nature works. There is general relativity, which beautifully accounts for gravity and all the things it dominates. Orbiting planets, colliding galaxies, the dynamics of expanding universe as a whole. That's big. Then there is the quantum mechanics, which handle the other three forces: magnetism, and the two nuclear forces. Quantum theory is extremely adept at describing what happens when an uranium atom decays, or when individual particles of light hit the solar cell. That small. Now for the problem. Relativity and quantum mechanics are fundamentally different theories that have different formulations. It is not just a matter of scientific terminology. It is a clash of genuinely incompatible descriptions of reality. The conflict between the two halves of physics has been brewing for more than a century, sparked by a pair of 1905 papers by Einstein. So again, those are theories that they try to come together. Everyone is trying to to look for the explanation, look for the one theory of everything, but to no avail. I haven't found it so far. And maybe the reason why they haven't found this is because this world, as a physical world, the way it explains in Chassidus, is inherently a fragmented world. This world is called Reshus Rabim, the public domain. It calls TORAH de Pruda, as the Alter Rebbe quotes this in Tanya. It says, Tachtoinin, this physical universe is the lowest of all creation, about which it is stated, God's creations. It says, Ismach Yisrael be'oisav, the creations of Hashem, in plural, in the plural form. Why? For this physical world is full of negative forces that are called the public domain and the mountains of divisions. So don't work too hard to find what unites everything in this, from this physical aspect, because you're not going to find it really. But you shouldn't give up hope, because there is an answer. The true theory of everything is when you look deeper in the places you didn't look before. When you look deeper in where everything really comes from. When you look at Hashem, that God is the source of all unity. So Chassidus explains that true achdus means unity. The true unity can only come from God. There are small manifestations of that achdus in this world. But the world on its own is inherently fragmented. That's why we just can't seem to make sense of it yet. The only time you'll be able to make sense of it is when godliness will be revealed in this world. And this is part of our journey in this world, is to search for this type of oneness, to search for this type of unity. That's part of learning Chassidus. This is why the teachings of Chassidus is revealed in the later generations as we get closer to Mashiach. And this is a quote from the Tzemach Tzedek, the third Chabad Rebbe. And he says as follows: understanding the idea of God's unity and what exactly the Zohar and other books mean when they speak of such matters is very deep. And there are many different ways of understanding it, each person according to their understanding. But first, let's explain the concept on the most basic level in halacha. The Zohar references this basic understanding, as does Maimonides, and it goes like this. There is already another mitzvah to believe in God, which includes the belief that God is completely without form. But this mitzvah of unity adds to that, enjoining us to believe that there is no other God, and nothing in creation has any agency aside from God. Everything exists and functions as a product of God's will and instruction. which is credited to the fact that God energizes and animates it. It turns out that there is nothing else other than God. Okay, we just read a paragraph. How much do we understand this? Obviously, there's a lot of depth to this. And the question after reading this paragraph, which comes out that basically everything is from God, and there is nothing, no other existence in this world other than God, then that seems to be a little bit contradicting to what we just said, that the world is fragmented. If the world is from God, then question follows, how could the world be fragmented? If God is one, then the world should be one. So, I'm sorry to disappoint you, but this is a question for another course. It takes a whole new depth of understanding in the differences. There's two paths. So that if to choose, for lack of another term, that God chooses to create this world is the path of that God animates it in an internal way, and there is the encompassing way. But again, this is not for today. The point we bring out over here is that the true unity is when everything comes from Hashem, because in God, everything is really one. And the way the world is created, the way the physical world is created, God put it for a purpose. He put a fragmented world, and he put us in a fragmented world so that we should find and search for the oneness, the true everything, the true theory of everything, which is finding God in everything. And this is why, when it comes to the Jewish people, the oneness comes from the Jew themselves. Hashem created the world, and he created the Jew so that the Jew with the Torah should find the oneness of Hashem. So the neshama, the soul of a Jew, is connected with the very essence of the Torah. The one part, the very essence of the Jew is one, which is one with Hashem himself. As Rashi says in the very beginning of the Torah, it says, Bereshis, the Torah begins, in the beginning God created. Says Rashi, Bereshis, b'shvil ha-Torah shenikas Reshis, or b'shvil Yisrael shenikru Reshis. God created the world for the sake of the Torah, which is called the beginning of his way, and for the sake of Israel, who are called the first of his grain. The word Reshis means the first and the beginning. And as the Rebbe explains, the idea of unity in this world is connected with the manifestation of the one unified God who transcends this world. That God's unity manifest in this world is credited to two things that in reality transcend this world: the Torah and the Jewish people, for whom the world was created. That the world was created for the Jewish people and for the Torah, that the Jewish people through the Torah should be able to find God, the oneness of God. The unity of the Jewish people came about as a direct result of the very nature of the Jew. From the essence of the Jewish soul that transcends reason, where differences occur. In the core of the Jew, there is no differences. This was able to influence an effect that the Jewish people camped there as one person. So that is the oneness, the unity of the Jewish people came about. Was not because of something that united them. It is the core that was revealed, that in essence they are one, and that's what brought them together to the Torah, to the receiving of the Torah. And then the very fact that they had stood as one people due to the interconnected part of their soul, thereafter awakened the desire and passion to receive the Torah with one heart. So that answers basically the question that we asked. Why was it necessary for us to receive the Torah as one person? And we asked, after all, the Torah is so vast and so different, so complex, then why shouldn't we accept the Torah individually? And the answer is because our receiving of the Torah was much, much deeper than the understanding of the Torah, the way we understand it in such a complex way. The receiving of the Torah was in the very essence, in the very core of our neshama. We wanted to receive it, the very essence and core of God. And that's what united us. We were united as one because we are one, and as a result, we were ready to receive the Torah and to receive the core of the Torah. Understanding came later. Yes, the Torah has vast understanding. And there's books and written of thousands and thousands of books that everyone takes and understands and translate and interprets the Torah, of course, based on the premise of what the Torah is given. You can't just make up your own stories and your own understanding in the Torah. It has to be based on the premise and on the foundations of the Torah. But that is already secondary to the very core and very fact of our unity in our soul. However, with non-Jews, this type of intrinsic unity is impossible. The one person. Rather, it can only be the symptom of a shared hatred as one heart. But for a Jew, whose core Jewish soul is the true identity, true unity is possible as one person. The Rebbe goes on and says, how is it possible to unite Jews to prevent discord, distance, and of course to prevent any animosity and fights? All the solutions pursued thus far, all the plans, the parties, the big ideas, none of them are able to dissolve the differences that exist between cultures, countries, and people. The only thing that can unite the Jewish people, regardless of time and space, is opposite the mountain. What it says, the Jews encamped opposite the mountain. Namely, the feeling that we are standing at Mount Sinai to receive the Torah. At that point, the walls came down, all disagreement and litigation dissolved, and we became as one. And the reason for this is that unity only flows from something that extends from the unity of God himself. God invested himself into the Holy Torah and its mitzvos, thereby investing himself into the Jewish nation. This is what a Jew lives with. I think I once told a story of the latest blood libel that took place in the Ukraine, I believe, with Mendel Bayless. And this was in, I think, in the beginning, the 1900s. So the beginning of the 19th century. And so there was the Jew that was accused of killing a Christian boy to use the blood for the matzahs. And this was a case, there was a trial that was all over the world. And Jews from all over the world followed this development of this trial. And they had the prosecutors who were not a small prosecutor, was very learned attorneys, and they came up also with one of the questions that came up was a quote from the Talmud that the Jews do not consider the non-Jews as human. And they said, it says in the Talmud that it says, Adam Atem, Atem Kruim Adam, that you are called Adam. Adam means a man. Ve'einu mata olam kruim Adam, the nations of the world are not called man. And they said, you see? In your Talmud, it says that people are not Jewish, they're not human. And one of the great rabbis that was helping in that case, if I'm not mistaken, was Rabbi Meir Shapiro of Lublin, of Chachma Lublin. And he said that this case that we are just, the trial that we are going through, explains that very statement of the Talmud. And he said, you see, it was a young child that was killed. And you look around and you ask, who cares about this case? Maybe the neighbors in that town, they care about this boy. Maybe you're going to go around the next town over. Yes, they may have heard of this case, but you go around the next city, nobody cares about this. Okay, there's a case, a Jew, somebody was killed, so who cares? Here's a Jew, Mendel Bayless, standing trial. And from all over the world, Jews who never heard about Mendel Bayless, but they care. They want to know what's going on. What's with this? And it says the word in Hebrew, Adam, which means man, is not the only term to describe men. In Hebrew, there is many other terms, like Ish is a man, Enosh is a man, Gever is a man. But there's a difference between the term Adam and the other terms. Every other term has singular and plural. There is Ish, there's Anashim, there's Gever, there's Gvarim. So there's the singular and there's the plural. Adam is the only term for man that you can have only singular and doesn't come in plural. Adam, there's no Adamim. There's only Adam, one, singular. That is something that can only be ascribed to the Jewish people. To be as singular as one and not plural, that we are only one, because in the core we are one. That is something that the Talmud explains. Atem kruim Adam. You are called Adam, you are singular, Adam, connected to Hashem. Of course, everyone else is human, and the Torah commands us to not even drink blood, and it commands us to be compassionate to any creature, humans, to animals. We have to be compassionate. But the idea of the core of Jewish unity is something that is so deep. And that was revealed at that time of the Matan Torah. But the Rebbe also teaches us and says that this core of unity, which is the core of everything, which is God, is in us, the root of our unity. But there's another thing. There's also, the Rebbe says that we take it to a next step. And what is the next step? That this is something that God commanded Moses, that this should be taught to all of the nations. We should be teaching to all of the nations that the basis of our civility, the basis of our world peace is when it's based on the observing of the laws that God commanded to the Gentiles as well. The 7 Noahide laws. I was traveling in London this week with taking Uber a few times, driving with mostly Muslim drivers. And with each one of them, we were talking about the Shever Mitzvahs B'nai Noach, the 7 Noahide laws. Yes, the whole belief in Moses. And there's the 7 laws that God commanded us. And the Maimonides explains, and the Rebbe encouraged us to teach us to all of the people, that the way we are supposed to observe those laws is not because they make sense, but because this is godly given to Moses on the Mount Sinai. And then that you connect the core of everything, the core of the one God that unites the fragmented world. That is the only way to bring peace to the world. So back in the days, this was something that was dangerous. You wouldn't be able to go over 100 years ago, 200 years ago to a Christian person or a Muslim person, tell them to believe in the Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach because God commanded to Moshe Rabbeinu on the Mount Sinai. But now is a time that we live in global freedom. We have the ability. And that is, says the Rebbe, is what will bring about the unity of the entire world. That not only the Jewish people will be united as one, but as well it says that all of the nations of the world will unite to serve Hashem all as one. Let us hope that this will happen very soon with the coming of Mashiach. Thank you for joining. Welcome any questions that anyone has.
Thank you, Rabbi.
You're very welcome, David.
The question is that the idea then that our inner oneness, one of the biggest goals is to get our inner oneness and our outer oneness together. This is why the separation was created. Because we are so separated in physical life as Jews, even. Not even other nations of the world, but even as Jews, we're so separated and different. So is that one of the goals then?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It is to find our unity is the only way to find our unity. Sometimes it comes out when there is a crisis, when there's a moment of crisis, when there's wars, when there's tragedies, all of a sudden we get together. But what happens then? The inner oneness comes out. But our job is to bring out this inner oneness, that it should be not just stays as once in a while, but it should be on a regular basis, that we should become part of our life. Become part of our life, this oneness of our nation first and for the rest of the world.
So how do we achieve that? Is that oneness through following the Torah? Is that the only way that Hasidim and Rabbi saw it as coming together?
Yeah, it is following the Torah, but not only that, it is also to learning the deeper teachings of the Torah that was revealed in the latest generations, which is the teachings of the Hasidus, teaching of the Tanya, and those were teachings that were revealed later on, as we get closer to Mashiach, and that brings about a deeper understanding in who we are. And when you understand who you are, yes, that leads to have a better world. When you know your place in the world, and there is no conflict, we're only helping and complementing each other, that brings the unity.